it is very challenging to open any four-wall business. So or to move across the country and do stand up in New York. These things take a lot of balls. I don't even know
Yeah.
what to say. Like you have to have a lot of courage to just, you will hear no more times in the day than you've ever imagined. Something is going to not work and you have to work around it.
Perfect timing isn't just for stand-up comedians. It's also for building community. And someone got the last laugh to prove it. Today, I sit down with my friend Angela Dennison, the powerhouse behind making Laughs Comedy Club the best in Seattle. She didn't plan to run a comedy venue, but when life presented the opportunity, she and her husband ran with it, building one of the most beloved comedy spaces in the Northwest. From navigating startup chaos to overcoming the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry, Angela's story is packed with grit, grace, and of course, laughter. We dive into what it takes to build a community, stay adaptable, and create a space where people can laugh, learn, and belong. This one's for the dreamers, the doers, and anyone who knows the power of a good punchline. Let's get into it here on Navigating No. Angela, you are a shining light in my life, and I just want to let you know that you do bring a smile to my face all the time because I love the quote behind you right now. Be the reason someone smiles today. And you, when you put that up, and the first time I ever saw it, I was like, it just made my day because you do make my day. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you being willing to come on today with us.
I'm glad you noticed it during our workout.
Well, you and I actually met at Gold's Gym, and that was many moons ago. That was a couple decades ago that we've known each other, and that was in Seattle. And we've just, our friendship has blossomed, and I've seen you grow as a woman in business and starting a comedy club and just taking your life and running with it. And it's just, your journey is exceptional. And I love your story. And I thought that you could bring some value to our audience. And I would just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being willing to do this and open up.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, can you tell the audience a little bit about you and your background?
Yes, I am the owner or co-owner, I should say, of Laughs Comedy Club in Seattle. We have been open 18 years, coming on our new location at 9 years. I have a background in dentistry. I'm a Seattle native, born and raised right here in Seattle, Washington. I'm married, and my lovely husband Dave and I own the club together.
Well, and it is a great club, and you invest in it all the time. You invest in bringing people in, and I've gone to many shows there, and even your new location, because A, I was in Seattle, and B, like, I love to support you. But did you always want to own a comedy club? Like, it's like, what's the background to that? Because I like comedy and I like Eddie Murphy and Chris Rock, but I'm not gonna go own a comedy club.
I think I was always a funny person, but I married into it. So it was never in my plans. I did not have an interest in it, but I think that some people are inherently funny or use humor in a way to deflect things or to make people more comfortable. And it's a skill I think you learn somehow in childhood that translated when I met Dave, and we were able to, like, as a couple, Dave says I'm the funniest comic in Seattle, and it's hilarious because I don't do stand-up. But the best part about it is I'm entertaining for the audience of one, which is him, and he's entertaining for the audience of one, which is me. So together, I think that's helped, but it never was like a starting point. I never said, oh, I want to be a stand-up, or I want to work in late night, or I never even thought about it or considered it.
Mm-hmm. So you married into it.
Yes.
And you married into it, but as soon as, like, when you married Dave and it was like, you guys have this comedy club together, like, did you ever see it blossom to what it has become today? Because, I mean, you've gone through challenges to keep a comedy club doors open, number one, but to keep the audience involved and engaged and not give you horrible reviews? Like, is it just a constant organic thing that you always are having to pivot, or is this like you pour your heart into it and it gets better and better and better year after year?
I think you have to be not afraid of change in a space that is full of change. And if you're expecting things to get better and better and better without making any adjustments, that's not going to work in this sort of space. It's not something that just builds upon it. Does build upon it, but the comedy scene is changing constantly. So you have to pivot and meet it where it's at. And if you stay stagnant, you won't be successful. And I distinctly remember the first time someone asked me, like, you should have a podcast. I'm like, what's a podcast? Like, sounds lame.
I don't know what that is either. I should look into that.
It was like 17 years ago. And had I listened to that person and said, let me try something new, who knows where we would be today with podcasting. But instead, I said, I have never heard of that. I don't want to hear about it, instead of being open to it. And so that is like something that happened in our first year of business that makes me think, what would, listen to the possibilities so that you can grow. Because if you're closed off and think you're just status quo, your business will not grow.
Well, and that separates you from your competition too, because you're not the only comedy club in Seattle. But you're the number one comedy club. So it's like, how do you stay above? How do you, is it constantly pivoting? Is it bringing in new comics? Is it creating events? Is it like, what have you found has been successful for you to be able to deal with that change?
I think success in comedy is building a community and working with people, whether those people are comedians, audience, or staff. And that is what will make you different from your competitor. If you're always looking at the bottom line and you're not taking in the human experience, you will be missing out. That's what I have found about our business is it's a human experience with all three of those things kind of working in a cohesive environment.
How do you go above and beyond, or how do you go that extra mile with the audience and with your staff and with the comics? Like you're doing something right. Like how are you standing out and how are you going that extra mile to not stay stagnant with that's three different audiences, right? It's three different groups. So how do you go that extra mile with people?
One is finding out what the customer likes or wants. You can read reviews online. There's always a grain of truth in a review. So sometimes people don't feel comfortable. People don't like confrontation. So if you can read a review, they might be more honest in a review than they would be to your face if you ask them. So I think reading reviews and taking them and finding a common thread and seeing if you can improve on those things that they have concerns about, or if you can exploit the things that they love about you and build on them. And then for the comics, feedback from comics, they wanted parameters, which is interesting. I always think of them as creative people, but a lot of people asked for parameters for like what is a path to success and what does it look like in your establishment and how can I meet those goals? Some people are very goal driven. So we've added some of those things and also keeping that human touch because we're there in the club a lot. That helps. And then with staff, that is always a learning. I didn't have any leadership background, so that is always a spot that you're, as the boss, it's hard because you're like the last to know when something is kind of brewing. So
sure.
I think Dave's a little bit more intuitive with staff, but I'm always learning and trying to see, what I can do better with staff. I always thought I would just treat people how I wanted to be treated when I'm a staff member and when I was working in dentistry. So how would I want to be treated?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not how not everybody wants to be treated the same in a work environment. So it's finding that, you know, that,
Mix.
yeah, the mix, exactly.
Well, and I guess I was going to say is that what you do to please somebody is going to be their currency, and you have to find their love language, right? You have to find out what best works for that, and the new employees might be different than the old ones, or whatever. And it's like this constant change. But do you do it by having reviews with them, or like annual reviews, or actually sitting down and taking them outside of the comedy club and asking your staff, like, what do you want? What do you like? What do you want to become after the club? Like, what do you do to inspire them to A, stay loyal to you, B, work for you, and C, like, I guess, become more valuable to themselves and realize that they are valued and appreciated?
Well, it's actually I find it's more organic for our staff because we do have 12 employees. Some don't, they love being there, but they enjoy their personal freedom and they don't want that intrusive mix between work.
Boss.
Yeah, they don't want,
Right.
I'm not going to be Facebook friends. That's kind of how I started. Like, like, hey, we're Facebook friends. Hey,
Yeah.
see online. I thought, but now people like some people want their personal space, and they just want to come in and do their job. And to them, a reward is maybe a bigger salary. To somebody else, it's a sense of community that they want. Maybe they don't know a lot of people in Seattle, and they don't have a lot of friends, and they want to come to work and have this sense of community. I don't use the word family because we're not family. This is an employer and employee relationship, and it's important to maintain those boundaries for myself and for them. But some people want that after work, decompress, hang out,
Yeah.
and friends. Not necessarily with me, but with their coworkers. And we have seen it after COVID, we've seen a big change in that, where they want a little bit more community. And comics are also part of that community because they're not exactly an employee, but they're local comedians and they want a place to be part of. And community has been very important.
Absolutely. Like when I'm brought in to speak, or if I do an acting job or a modeling job, it's like you connect with the staff, you connect with the producer and the director and the videographer or the photographer or the stylist. And it's like when I go on location, you start to, where do you go out to eat? Where should I go? And it's like this, they make me feel accepted, and that makes me feel part of the community, even though I'm not from there. And then from speaking, the same thing. It's like the event planner is like, hey, you should check out this restaurant, or also asking what I can do to help, right? Like, I'm sure that some of your comics ask, how can I help promote your comedy club, right? Like, because it's a win-win for everybody. So how can I help the event planner shine from stage, and what can I do to improve the audience, get more people to come and visit? And it's like, I'm assuming some comics do that for you as well.
Yeah. Some nationally touring acts, some local acts. Like I said, everybody has a different relationship with what they're looking for out of that community. And it's just meeting those people that want to help and be part of it. It's just finding that, again, that mix. From some people are Most comedians that are local have a day job, and they've excelled or not excelled in that day job for whatever reason.
Right.
But some people work at Amazon and they're more, with or military, almost like a chain of command in a very corporate structure. And others are very free spirited and they're working independently. Or some people work at home and they're on Zoom or working on a laptop all day and they want that human connection. It's just really finding out what that person can do, what we can do to help each other. So some people want to say, hey, I want to market this and I have a lot of friends and I want to bring them to the club. But actually over the years, I've learned that what someone's opinion of marketing might be different than my opinion of marketing and what their goals are. I've asked a lot more questions than I would have asked, say, 15 years ago.
But you're learning, right? You're learning as a boss, but you're also learning as like someone who books these comics, right? And you touched on COVID just today. I mean, there was a point in your time when COVID hit that you didn't know if you were going to be able to keep the doors open. So how scary was that?
It's terrifying because it was, we didn't know when we were going to come back. The goals kept changing, and it wasn't the same. Like, this is a national or international. Touring acts are for comedy are not just United States. They're Canada. They're England, whatever. They're worldwide. But our friends in Salt Lake City or our friends in Texas, they're functioning differently. Every state had a different mandate and protocol. Which
these are different friends with comedy clubs.
Yes.
Okay.
And comics.
So all men and comics.
Yeah.
Did you have problems with some comics, like if they had reserved with you for this date and then COVID hit? Did you get any pushback and people were like, well, you still owe me money, or are you still this, or
Nothing.
Was everybody very willing?
No, everyone was very understanding. No issues there. There. But some people were back. One comedian was telling me, like, hey, when we reopened, he came back to the club. He's like, it's just crazy. He's like, I'm in Arizona, no mask, doing a show for a room full of people. And then I get on a plane wearing a mask, come to Seattle, and I'm in a room that only can seat 25%, and we're all wearing masks. He's like, what am I doing? Like, yeah. He's the one traveling. If he has COVID, he's like infected. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. It was a really, really crazy situation. Very crazy. And I hope we never have to do that again.
Yeah, I agree, because your comedy show is worth going to in public. And there's no other better way to experience comedy than just being in the room with everybody. And I would emphasize, if you have never been to a comedy show, to go and experience. It's such a unique experience, and you guys do a great job, whether that's the comic, the headliner, or if it's the comics that come up beforehand. And another thing that was interesting that, and a lot of shows do this, is that the comics might interact with the audience afterwards. Like, after they get up and they do their bit, they get in the audience, they sit down with everybody, or they'll sit back at the bar and communicate with everybody. And it's like this open community. And I think that you guys nail that every time, about being this community and everybody feeling like you belong there.
Yeah, definitely. Community is really important with stand-up, and the fans love to interact. Some comics are not comfortable interacting after a show, whatever. It's hard when you have to perform and you've got stuff going on in your personal life. And so now there's this expectation sometimes from fans that, that there is going to be this exchange of ideas after a show, and people love to share something that's connected them to, I find myself doing it. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, that bit, that really resonated with me. And I want to tell them, oh, I identify with that. And same thing happened to me. And sometimes they're like, they're just not in the mood to hear it. But I find most of the time they're very welcoming.
Oh, I love that you hit on that, because when I get off stage and I start to interact with the audience, and everybody comes up after you get a standing ovation or claps or whatever, it's the people that they come up and they want to tell you their story. And like, they express that, I had no idea my dad meant that much to me, or I had no idea that this coach really impacted me the way that I never saw it in that light. And this is what it meant to me when you said this, or it really hit home, and you were talking directly to me. That makes everything so great for me. That's why I do what I do, speaking from the stage. And it's like impacting people. And so for a comic to not want it, I love it. It actually inspires me to get up and speak from the stage the next time.
But it could be that, for us, we have 4 shows in a weekend, and your life is going on. You're booked for these shows 6 months in advance, and you could have something really awful going on in your personal life, and
Yeah.
you still have to go on stage, entertain, and then leave stage and entertain, or sell merchandise, and you're on all the time. And so it
Hmm.
can be a lot if somebody's like, listen, I'm going through something. There's a comedian that I thought was great. I think he's wonderful. He'd been to the club before, and he has this show, and afterwards I'm trying to talk to him, and he's just rude and abrupt with me. And the whole weekend was kind of like, just didn't feel right. And follow up with his agent on Sunday when I report all of the numbers and all the pay and all that stuff. I said, yeah, it just was a different sort of weekend. He goes, well, his pilot he's been working on for years, they called him at 5 o'clock on Friday and told him it wasn't going to happen.
Oh,
It's like, something you're putting it's hard to say, like, okay, something I've been working on all year is not going to happen, and I was kind of counting on it to happen, and now I have to go and perform. And you don't want to be dismissive of the venue or the audience, so I'm sure he came in with as much positivity
yeah.
as he could, but he just didn't have the time for the extras.
Hmm.
And I get it.
Well,
I've been there myself.
well, we all have, right? We all have. Like, I love when you go into a restaurant and you just get horrible service, and when you're like, well, what are we going to tip? And somebody says, well, maybe they're having a bad day, because you don't know. I mean, maybe they did have a bad day, right? But I didn't come in for a bad day.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. You talk about navigating a no, and how hard is it? I do this specifically before I go on stage. I never look at emails. I never look at anything that I'm about to do, because if I let that get into my mind before I go and I perform, I can't. And my karate instructors told me this a long time ago. It was 35 years ago. And he said, when you come in these doors, you leave everything at the door, because when you're in here, you're here to train. And it really opened up something for me of like, you're there to train. And then when you leave, your problems are still going to be there. So don't worry about them until you leave. But it's hard. That is a hard
Right.
mental game to get over. And I can put you and I both can put ourselves and say it's easier said than done.
Yes, it is easier said than done. But Dave always says we have an obligation to the public to put on a show, which I think is hilarious, because there's no obligation to the public. But
Unless they're paying, right?
I mean,
That's,
I think it's just an interesting, like this serve and protect mentality. Like, we have an obligation. Like, there's no obligation to put on a show. I think it's just I think it's always like if we'll be out to dinner like before the show starts, or out doing something and we're having a great time, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to go to work, and he's like, we have an obligation to the public.
I'm gonna start using that with all my students or anybody. You have an obligation to go forward with this for 100%. I love that.
It's a funny mentality to have when putting on something that nobody needs. It's like,
right.
This isn't life or death, but according to Dave, it is. It's an obligation to the public.
But I mean, going to a comic club, I love leaving a comedy show, and it's funny, but it's so funny when you have a great comic and you're listening the whole time and you're like, oh, everything's landing, everything. I'm interested, and it's so funny. And then you leave and you're talking to your friend or your wife, and you're like, oh, remember when what did he say? I don't remember what she said. I don't. And it's like, maybe you remember a couple things, but the entire thing was funny, but you only get like a couple nuggets out of it. Right. And it's so hilarious because unless you could see it multiple times, it's the moment is there, and it's like you can relate so well. And I think that's what the great comics do, is that they tell the story that you can come along with, but at the same time, when you leave, you're like, I know it was funny, but I don't remember everything that he said, and why not?
Yeah, you just don't remember exactly how the joke goes. It's the craftsmanship of the art of stand-up that they have put together such a well-crafted joke, and you're like, oh, I'm going to retell that joke. That's my favorite joke. And then you try to tell it, and you're like, how did I butcher it? It's only like 15 words. You're like, you can't get them in the right order.
But you also do comic classes and improv, and it's like you teach people how to be funny and how to deliver lines and how to have the confidence to move up and get up in front of people and open yourself. I mean, it is a skill set that can be learned, but you also mentioned that you think that it's at a younger age is when you kind of get it. Um, what what is your experience with what I guess what makes a great comic?
Someone who's comfortable on stage and vulnerable. All that stuff that's inside you that you're like, I do this and it's kind of weird, or my wife does this, or my husband does this, or I grew up this way. And when you start to share it, you're like, other people are like, hey, that's my experience too. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think being able to bring people along for the ride makes a great comic. And it takes being comfortable on stage and being vulnerable. Those are the two. If I was to give any advice to someone, is just to be comfortable on stage.
And that goes for anything, like any industry. If you're going in for a job interview or if you're giving a speech or anything like that, it's being that comfortable and being vulnerable. I agree with that 100%. When people try to give negative reviews off of people and you like, how do you deal with that? Like you had mentioned earlier that you're reading the reviews and there's a nugget of truth in there. How do you deal with negativity? And it's like, because one review can ruin your club, right? Depending on the influencer or something like. So how do you not take it personally? How do you move on, or how do you deflect it or deal with horrible reviews on Google or on Yelp?
I think that it's pretty rare to have something. Usually, people are making a review of, in our case, of the service, the venue, and that's where their level of review comes in. When they're talking about the stand up, I find it's people that were, maybe the comic pushed some buttons either politically or something about maybe race or religion that the other person does not find funny.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see more reviews of comedy on people's actual stand up, like on YouTube, and that's for the comic to deal with. But
Not
uh,
your club in general.
yeah, I mean, people will
Right.
say, like, oh, I didn't find it funny. Well, that doesn't really help anybody because the
Sure.
comics are going to change from week to week and there's
Yeah. Or
clips online.
daily.
So it's like, I really don't, I mean, there's occasionally, maybe I can think of like one or two reviews in 20 years where you're like, this person's a bigot,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not going to let it change what we do. We're going to showcase all sorts of different stand-up comedy, and that's why there's clips online. Maybe it's not for you, but it's for somebody else. Just give everybody like kind of an even playing field, if you will.
Yeah.
So if it's not your style of comedy, there's a few things that are hard no's for me as far as like content. And so if I
Mm-hmm.
view the material before and I would say, listen, it's just not going to fly here. We're in Seattle, we buy for our market, and I'm do not like hate speech. There are
Mm-hmm.
some things that are gray area that are maybe, you know, body shaming
Mm-hmm.
jokes wouldn't be my favorite, or where, a person is the brunt of the joke, but I can, it's still freedom of speech. But when it's hate speech, it's just really not my cup of tea.
But you also have the ability to not bring them on. Like
Exactly.
you can say
Yeah.
no. You can tell somebody no, right?
Yes, we tell people no all the time. I mean,
do you,
it doesn't mean
do,
that they're not funny or that people don't
yeah.
like them. It just means that
Yeah.
it's not a fit for here. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, comedy is like a mall, and there's lots of things that live inside that mall. There's movies you can see. There's YouTube content. There's books, and there's stand up, and there's improv. There's all these things that incite laughter and make people feel good. But we're buying for Seattle market, and we need to put things in our store in that comedy mall that make sense. And it has nothing to do with what I like. It's what's going to sell in this market. And there are certain things that maybe this market, it's narrower for that, um, for this marketplace. So it'd be harder for me to sell that product if you
Mhm.
think of that comic
Yeah.
as a product in this market. Doesn't mean that they're not funny or that they're not successful. It's just this market, will that sell? And that's the question.
Well, and that translates to anything. Like it
Yeah.
really does. And being able to make that choice is one thing. But I mean, even the greatest comics aren't the greatest to everybody, right? You can't
That's true.
appease everybody. So it's like somebody might like Fred and somebody really doesn't like Fred. And you're not going to please everybody. But as long
Sure.
as you have that buffet style where you can pick from of different people, which is also what you do, you bring in different kinds of comics. You bring and so it's this wide range, so that you know what, I have this month and I'm looking at your schedule and I say, oh, this person is a country comic. I have no idea what that means, but I just made it up. And it's like, I really identify with country stuff, so I'm going to go to this, or this person really hits on this topic. And it's we get to choose as the audience member too, right? It's not like you have someone coming every weekend. Maybe you do you? I don't know.
I mean, sometimes people have like they the I think where the problems hit is like, hey, we want to go see a comic and we're not going to do any research and we're just going to buy tickets to a random show, and they show up, and this is very rare, but it does happen where people are like, you know what, I'm just going to go see it. I want to go to a show. I want to, and it's always something
Have
terrible
fun.
like,
Yeah.
my dad just died. I think I'll go to a comedy show and be cheered up. And you're already not in a state of mind to
Yeah.
want to. You shouldn't be going to a live show. That's my opinion. But
Well, and
this is
add salt to the injury if the comic talks about a dad dying. It's even worse, right?
or their experience with death, or
Yeah.
and it just hits wrong. So and other times people say, I'll say, oh, are you a fan of the show? Are you a fan of the comic? And they go, you know what? We've been here so many times. We love everybody that we've seen here. Some people are more open and want to just try something, just random, and see if they like it. Like live music. Sometimes you're like, okay, I like this type of music. And then you walk into okay, there's live music playing. And it's like, oh, it's bluegrass. I hate bluegrass.
Yeah.
Why am I here? You could do, you tried something, you don't like bluegrass, move on. You don't need to write a review. Like, I went to a bluegrass festival and I hated the music. Okay, well, cool. Why'd you go? But, you can also look at it the other side. Like, I tried something new and I learned that I'm not a fan of bluegrass.
Yeah. It's just one thing less you know not to do again.
Have we alienated your bluegrass audience?
Exactly. It's all right. Well, you had mentioned that you agreed that you could tell people no, but are you reaching out and asking clients? Like, are you told no? Like, not clients, but are you reaching out and getting and trying to get a comic? Like, if you ask Chris Rock to come in, you reach out to his agent I don't know how it works, but if you reach out to his agent, you might be told no. So how do you deal with no? Like, do you have these dream star people that you're like, we really want to land this person and bring them in, but we've been told no? And if you are told no, what do you do with that? Do you follow up later? Like, what is the process to land somebody that you really want to bring in that you feel would not only make you money, but bring a lot of value to the audience, the Seattle market?
Well, if I find someone that I really, at this point, after, the amount of time we've been doing this, 18 years or what have you, if I want to see somebody at our club personally, I'm like, I think this person's going to be great, I'll reach out. And if I'm told no, usually I get a reason. But there's often that I don't get a reason. And it's hard. I might reach back out one more time. But if I'm told no for a comic coming to this market, I would say I don't usually push. I might ask one more time, but usually I get a reason. Either they're playing at their club, or they're going to a bigger venue, or they're not currently touring right now. And it might be, I've learned over the years that it could be that they just, they're working on something that they can't talk about. Maybe they're good, doing a writing project or auditioning for something, or they have a family situation where they're like maybe they're expecting a child or they're going through something and they're not in a space. Or they haven't written any new material and they're not prepared to tour and they don't feel comfortable sharing that. So used to be that I would be more like hurt, well, why don't they want to play here? What did I do? How come we're not good enough? And now I'm just take a step back and say, well, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. There will be many other fantastic people we can work with.
And you can fill it, right? Like it's not the end. Yeah, there's somebody will say yes.
Exactly. Someone will say yes.
Exactly. I would love to know this if it's true or not, and I'm assuming that when people get a Netflix show or an HBO special, they just get up there and they do it. They have worked for a long time crafting their pauses, crafting their nonverbal language. Like they work for that, let's say a year, then they finally give that. Is that true? Because I have a feeling that the comic shows or the comedy clubs is where they kind of get the practice in. They get the repetitions in and they see what works, what lands, what doesn't. And then they start to craft a certain style or a certain a special. Then they do the special. Is that how it works?
Traditionally, I mean, a lot of people do. Different comics have different ways of how they put together their specials. Mm-hmm. But most people will put together what they call their hour, and they're working on their hour. And so they're moving things around or trying things out, and they're usually touring all over the country with this hour. And then they'll put it out on Netflix. But it can also be difficult to do that if they've toured the hour and then they put it out on Netflix. Well, it's like, wait, we already saw it because we were live in the club. So now with this, with the digital age, people are like more thoughtful in how they put things together, how they tour things, and how they're going to put their specials out or their recordings. Some people, they'll do their special or they'll do their recording. They used to be a CD and they never do that material again. And it's gone. And then other times, and sometimes they don't own it. We just have been finding this out. There's a big push in stand-up. They don't own their content. And
somebody writes it for them?
No, like they wrote their material and they sold the material to HBO or Netflix. Because that used to be a thing. Like you'd rent your own theater. You'd get your own audience. You'd write your hour in hopes that someone would give you a big check for it, like HBO or Showtime. So now with digital, you're like, great, I had my hour. It got sold to Showtime for however much they sold it for. They don't own that. They don't own that content. They own it in a sense that they could retell it, but they don't own what was produced. That's owned by Netflix or that's owned by Showtime.
Like an IP of some kind.
Yeah, so you can't just go back and say, okay, my Netflix special, I want to put that on Angela Dennison YouTube channel. Nope, you don't own it. So
wow.
A lot of comics are in the process of re-recording old material that they enjoyed, that they liked, that they wanted to put now on their own YouTube channel. So things that were a stream of profitability would have been their own YouTube channel. They don't own that right. And so when you have a Netflix special, Netflix owns not the material, but the special and the production. You don't get to put that on your own channel. I mean, unless that's negotiated.
Yeah,
it's pretty crazy.
Well, and I'm assuming it evolves and it changes, and those are things because I know that one of the things that you offer comics is that you offer like a full video service. So when a comic gets up and pitches their hour, right? You're filming them so that they can get those little snidbits of all their one lines and like the interactions. It's like it's a service. So for me speaking, for example, if I go and I give a speech to JP Morgan Chase, if they don't have it filmed or recorded, I might have to bring a videographer in to do it, to get those sound bites, to get those B-roll and to get like me giving those one lines so that I can cut them up and I can add them to my YouTube shorts or I can add to my Instagram or LinkedIn. And you're just providing that to them. I mean, that's awesome. That's one of the things that I love when a client brings me into speech is that, or speak, they say, we're going to film this. You can use it. And that can be negotiated as well. But it's like, it's gold when I do get those sound bites, when I do get that sound or the video or the B-roll. And it helps my content and it helps me constantly evolve as well. That's something that you guys now offer.
Yeah, we just installed new 4K cameras, new sound system, because it was one of the things that was being asked a lot was, can I bring in my own videographer? Well, the sound's not, our sound system was old. So it's like, well, the sound's not exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to have to drop mics in and mic the audience. So we did all of that this year in hopes that we can provide, again, a competitive edge. And then also, maybe there's something, we're going to start a new show concept where we're going to work with local comics and do some of the editing for them so they have those clips that they can have in very short time in order to kind of work together as a cohesive team to put out that content.
Oh, and that's a one-stop shop. It's like you're allowing that, but it's just more value to the comic and the audience gets to see things. And I think that's great. I love that you're moving towards that because I can see the value of that. Because it gets expensive. It starts to add up if I bring a videographer in and it's like, it's like my modeling agency or my acting agency. They always say, can you do more portfolio? Can you do test again? And it's like, oh my gosh, the cost of that every time. So by you allowing them to take advantage of it, it's just phenomenal. I love that.
And the new show concept will be trending topics too. So hopefully it'll be material that's not as well written, but kind of like in the moment clips that we can use that won't stomp on that creative process for future recordings for what is well flushed material. So things that are kind of more like a late night that are like disposable, things that are more topical that might not live in their standard sets.
Well, I want to change gears just for a second here and talk about, like, you had mentioned that you weren't funny, like you didn't want to be a stand-up comic, but if you were to tell people, like, if you want to get into comedy, like, what's a path that you would suggest for them to do? Like, what would you tell them to surround yourself around, or what are some tricks that you have from seeing it from the booking side and the comedy club ownership side? How would you tell a young comic wanting to get into the industry, like, don't give up, but do these couple of things? What are some nuggets that you would tell them?
I would say first of all, find a creative process that works for you. So some people like to have like a little notebook with them where they're writing down funny ideas. Some people journal throughout the day, where they're like sit down and they write or they have, some people have writing prompts. There's a lot of different creative process, but the first is to like find your creative process. And it's not the same. It's not going to be the same for everybody, but try a bunch of different things and see what works for you for a creative, process. I would say you have to have a life worth commenting on. So, trying to find things that are interesting or different about you to write about so that you can share with the audience. Being out around, you can't just lock yourself in a room and hope creativity, but things that happen to you throughout the day or something that happened to you at work or, relationships so a process. That's one thing. Second is find out how getting on stage you would feel most comfortable in. Some people like to try open mic and they'll go online, look up an open mic in their city, and they just go to an open mic and just try it. There's a lot of comedy classes. You can do classes online. There's people that help people online that are free. It's just what works for you. Some people, stand-up comics say, don't take a class. You can learn everything online. Well, some people need to be accountable and they want to go and hold a physical microphone and feel the space and have someone kind of like prompting them and pushing them. And other people just want to go up and try it. So I would say, again, those two things, find out what's going to work for you and on a personal level to try it. And what is your creative process going to be? And feel free, try different things. So if you're going to the open mic and you're like, listen, I'm not getting any traction and I'm not getting the results I want, try a class. Okay, I tried a class, but I can't, I can't get up on stage. It just depends. I mean, I would say that it is challenging to do
Public
stand-up
speaking
comedy.
is challenging, and I would suggest to anybody to just try an improv class or try an open mic, because that is terrifying for people. Like and even if I think that I know the material, and you stand up and you're in front of people and everybody's looking at you, it's like, and like, but what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're just going to fumble your words. I mean, really, that's
Well,
what
the problem with open mic is they're often late at night, and they might not be in a place that's super safe. So to you, so it's harder. I always tell people, like, think about, a guy might say, well, it's easy. I just hit up all the open mics. Okay, well, it might be harder
yeah.
for a mom who's got kids that she's got to put to bed at night, get ready for school, to hit up the open mic and go up at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday. So it's going to be like, where is she going to find the space to try stand-up comedy? It's going to be harder. So that's what, say, don't feel like, oh, well, I can't go to open mic, so I'm not going to do stand-up comedy.
Try something else.
We have a 5:30 class. Try a class. It's early in the day. Try online. You can do it at home. You can practice in front of a mirror. There's a lot of different things you can do. Don't limit yourself. Think about those possibilities. How would I write and create? And how would I get in front of an audience? Toastmasters or something where you're learning. There's so many different ways you can go about it that are not just what you think of as traditional stand-up.
That's brilliant. In all seriousness, I love that. When you're providing these classes, have you ever seen anybody like just open up and be like there were a diamond in the rough? Like, has anybody taken any of your classes and was like, I don't know if I'd be good, and they've just taken off? They actually have a career out of becoming a comic?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's Dave, my husband, took a stand-up comedy class. I would hope to think he's successful. He owns one of the best clubs in the country. So there you go. Alonzo Bowden, who won Last Comic Standing, I know he took a stand-up comedy class. And there's lots of people that are past comedians that work at our club that have taken stand-up comedy classes. It's just what you find works for you. It's the class is to give you a safe space to try and fail. Like, okay, I can learn how to, there's all these unwritten rules in comedy that we all know, that when you walk into a space, you're like, I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that. So just, what happens if the microphone cable comes apart? How do you put it back together? How do you hold the mic stand? Where do you put the mic stand? How close is the mic to your face? Where do you stand on stage? Where do you look? I mean, my favorite is someone who shows up in the world's biggest hat. And you're like,
yeah, she's covering her eyes for the people not able to see that.
Like, no one can see your face when you're wearing a huge hat. Like, why are you wearing this hat? People that wear like a ginormous parka, like, why are you so closed off? I mean, little things that people don't think about, like, where are you going to put your purse? Where are you putting your backpack? Like, sometimes people bring all that stuff on stage. You don't look open and vulnerable when you're got a parka on and a huge hat. I mean, these are things you would think people would learn, but they just haven't. I mean, you can wear a parka and a coat. I'm not saying you can't.
I'm going to go on stage next with a giant woolly mammoth coat. I think that's what's going to work for me, for sure.
Or beach attire. It's crazy. I see everything.
But that's adapt and learning as you go along and taking those chances and getting up in front of people and conquering a fear, right? And for you, I mean, you just left a career in dentistry, and it's like now you're going full board in the comedy club. Like, how hard of a transition was that? How scary was that for you to leave something that was a part of you to become a full-time comedy club owner?
Well, I think it was terrifying, because I'm like, this is like my security blanket, right? I've got my health insurance, my vacation, and structure, like, am I going to get up every morning still at 6:30 every morning and do my stuff? Or am I going to, stay late at the club and have tons of drinks, which is still what I want to do, but I haven't developed that problem yet. You just kind of wonder what's going to happen. It was very challenging, but I'm glad I did it. And I think I'm glad that I waited too, because I think I could have done it sooner. And this has just been, I wasn't needed to do it sooner, actually, because Dave had always been kind of there. But now that he had to take a little step back for medical reasons, it kind of created this void in our business that was successful. It's like, well, how do we carry on? Well, we're going to have to change some things. I'd actually always enjoyed going to work and him doing his thing at the club and then meeting up at home afterwards. It's like, what kind of makes a relationship, right? That you can have something to talk about your day. But this is a new chapter, new beginning.
But you've also, I want people to know that you just don't run a club. It's like you fill in when somebody's not there. You run the bar. You are the bar back. You're the hostess. You're the waitress. Take tickets. You deal with problems within the audience. Like you're a jack of all trades, and you have to be, but you have to fill in if there's something needed. And that's one of your requirements as the leader of the club.
Yeah, we're not quite to a business point where we can have like another general manager. Right now we have a general manager. We did add that, and she has taken more of that. But initially in business, when you're like, okay, what happens when the cook doesn't show up? Well, guess someone has to be a cook. When a server is sick, when a bartender's sick, or when you're unexpectedly busy. We've had a semi-famous influencer show up. I had no idea who she was. Showed up and said, "Can I do a set?" Okay, great. And then all of a sudden 70 people rolled in. I'm just not prepared for 70 people. You've got to support your staff. Mm-hmm. They can't be just buried. So yes, I've done every business. And I also think if you do every position in your business, where the struggles are. So it's like, okay, you're thinking this is an easy job. I'm a hostess. Well, wait, what challenges am I facing? So now when you're training somebody or you're hiring somebody, you're like, you know what? I think I need to find this quality in a person because that's needed to do this job. Or I need to give this employee more empowerment, or I need to give a tool. So once you do something, you're like, wait a minute, we don't have this. And Dave's really great at that stuff too. Like he's moved stuff around, or like, hey, we need a refrigerator right here where people can get stuff instead of having to go all the way to the back. It's too frustrating.
Well, and
and you don't know
putting
until you
yourself.
do the job.
Yeah, you're putting yourself in the weeds, right? I guess that's the term. But it's like you're actually getting down and dirty and understanding. But that's also what makes you guys stand out, and it makes, I'm assuming, the staff feel appreciated, because if you know their pain points and you can put yourself in their shoes, that makes them feel vindicated if something's wrong. But it's also, you've been up on stage and you've delivered comedy. You know what the comic's expecting. And you also know as an audience member, because you travel to different comic locations or clubs, because you want to see the competition. You want to know what they're doing, what works, what doesn't work, or, oh, we could improve this, or let's bring this. And so you know what it's like to be an audience member. And it's like, you're able to put yourself in their shoes and see through a different perspective. And I think that's gold.
Yeah, it's important even to be an audience member. Like you said, we just watched a show at our own location in a seat that we never sit in. We just went to a random seat, sat down, Dave and I next to each other, and we tried to order drinks. We're like
you had a date?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah. We want something. Seeing it from the audience perspective, and it's just fun to sit and try new things and see, like, okay, what does this angle bring? What does this? And then in a different city, in a different market, how do they handle their open mic, or how do they start their shows off, and kind of just seeing if you can utilize some of their ideas.
How difficult is it for you to be a woman in let's say, a male-dominated business? Because I don't know how many women-owned comedy clubs, but it can't be the biggest number based off of what we've talked about. Like, how difficult was it for you to not only succeed in that market, but overcome some of the challenges of actually entering the market?
I think it's. I think where it starts is we're talking about this with NBC had like a show like comics and diversity, and it was interesting is that a lot of people that were part of that group were women,
Mm-hmm.
and there was this speaking and going to some conferences with comedy. It's about the pipeline, and so often when it comes to like club or venue ownership, it's something where you've done the job before, you've been a stand-up comic. But I would say the more challenging job than venue, well, it's being a woman in this industry can be challenging at all different levels, but I really think being a stand-up itself is the most challenging as a woman. There's a lot of travel and a lot of choices. The traditional family home has the mother is responsible for raising children or picking them up after school or taking them to soccer. So if that pipeline isn't built with like women starting in stand up, then owning it and coming into a venue from a comedic standpoint is really challenging because you don't have that initial pipeline. I think things have changed. So initially, for me, um, you know, it, I don't know. I didn't really grow up in a way that where I was told like I can't do stuff or, that um, that I was limited. So maybe I kind of came at it a little bit different. Sometimes people would tell me like a guest would say, "I'd like to speak to someone in charge," and I would come, and they go, "Where's the man?" That's my hilarious. I'm like, Dave was like, "I gotta go get Dave," and then he's like, "Okay, well you have to talk to her because this is what she does." But I think that now there are way more women involved in venues and in booking and in talent management and at the networks. There's a lot more light being shed on that, but it's still tough.
Yeah.
Like I said, to go to start an open mic, just to go late at night and walk back to your car is a challenge that a lot of men, don't face. To
Yeah.
leave a venue at 11 o'clock at night and feel worried about getting home safely. And to be honest, I think I just went into it with blinders. I had a lot of being married to the other person that's involved in your business. It stopped quite a bit of that harassment that I might have gotten that women have experienced in stand up. So I had that as my fortunate side is that I didn't have to deal with that.
Yeah.
Dave did a lot of the booking and developed a lot of the relationships early, which were male to male contact, on email. I still to this day don't even have an email address. Sometimes I just find it easier to use Dave's name, which is weird, but I don't know. It's been working for me. I just, yeah,
But I
I
mean
don't know.
that is the epitome of what we're talking about too, right? It's just easier for somebody to be able to read that and say, "Oh, it's Dave." Wait, no, it's Angela.
Yeah, yeah,
Right? That's interesting.
yeah. So I still do that, and then the only thing is sometimes that on a like a local level, I think that there's this like feminine energy that people feel like they can complain to me um, as a woman, like, "Oh, you understand," like a sympathy that I'm going to be softer than you.
Right.
And that I would say is probably the biggest challenge is to put up those non-mommy vibes for people. Like Dave said no, so I'll ask Angela. That happens with staff and that happens with comics. It's been much less. And as I've grown that harder shell, I've heard people say that I'm intimidating, that I'm harsher than they expected. I've had more complaints, but I don't think they would complain about a man doing the same job. I know that they don't because they don't. I don't hear about it. But we have progressed in stand up a lot, but it's still a challenge. But I have to be a little bit more firm. Dave says I'm still too nice.
Well, I know you personally, and you are very nice. So but I haven't worked for you, and I haven't been one of your comics or anything like that. But you actually introduced me to a mutual friend, Ellen Aquario, and
Yeah.
she's a stand-up comic, and she took off, and she has kids, and it's a lifestyle that is probably hard for her. But she's found success, but she found that through people believing in her and giving her that opportunity to get on stage and giving her that chance. And you're just one of those little tools that she's been able to utilize and help her basically propel her career as well. And it's just you stand behind people, you stand behind your comics, and you stand behind your staff. And I've heard not only horror stories, but at the same time, I've heard you so complimentary about, if you do hear a horror story, you deal with it and you figure it out and you work through that no with your staff and with the comics. And it's like, you might look intimidating or sound intimidating, but your heart is in it and you care. And I think that is another reason that your club has been so successful, because you care. You care about the staff, you care about the audience, and you obviously care about the comics and their experience.
Community has been one thing that I've taken away from after all these years, is having this community of great people that we get to work with, staff, audience, and comics. And
Oh, I'd love that. Well, if I was to ask you what your hardest challenge, whether that is being a woman in business or being an owner or through your life, what would that one thing be? Like, what was your hardest no that you've ever received?
Let's see, hardest no that I've ever received. I would say just starting. The hardest no was like we signed this lease, stars in our eyes. We thought we're going to start this wonderful comedy business, and it was a no. It felt like at every single turn. The city of Kirkland, where we started, was like, no, you're not going to get a business license. Um, the bank was like, no, you're not going to get a loan. You just having those, starting a business in general was the biggest challenge we have ever faced. And every time someone said no, it's like, okay, where's the workaround? How can I make this work? And I'm not going to lie, there was a few times I had a complete meltdown. I showed up to work my day job with just a scrunchie on top of my head. It was one day crying because it was all falling apart. And I'm like, I just walked into work. I looked like a train had hit me. And they're like, no one said a word, which is hilarious. When you show up sobbing to work, no one's like, they just give you a lot of space. That's it. Just, you know what? She's fine.
Let her figure it out.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest challenge. It doesn't have anything to do with gender. It was, or my, background or anything. It was just starting a business. A four walls is hard. It's really hard. I just saw there's a restaurant that's down the street, and they're opening up a new location, and they've been working on it for a year. And I saw the guy at Safeway, and I said, when's your restaurant going to open? He goes, let me tell you something. Don't ever open a restaurant. It's awful. It's terrible. And I'm like, no, dude, why do you think we only have one? It is very challenging to open any four-wall business. So or to move across the country and do stand-up in New York, these things take a lot of balls. I don't even know what to say. Like, you have to have a lot of courage to you will hear no more times in the day than you've ever imagined. Something is going to not work, and you have to work around it. And that was my biggest challenge, just opening a four-wall location. By the way, we had one person apply for a job for 10 people the first time we opened. Imagine that.
Only one. Well, we had Nathan O'Brien. We hired them. That was a perfect lineup for that one. We had Nathan O'Brien come on, and he talked about starting a Lilac City Comic Con. It was the only Comic Con available in Spokane, and he goes, "We only had one cosplayer the first year that we did it. It was like a stormtrooper. I was like, well, that's pretty cool, right? But how awesome would it be to be the only stormtrooper at a Comic-Con? But it's like you have to start somewhere. And I love that that's golden of what you said, is you have to start somewhere, and everything is going to feel like it's against you the entire time, whether that's permitting or it's scheduling or it's like staffing or it's the bank or a loan. You are going to be challenged and hit with setback after setback after setback, starting a business or starting a new career. But that's the journey. And you have become successful, and people see your milestone now of owning one of the most successful comedy clubs, especially in the Pacific Northwest. And it's like, how did you get there? You had a lot of challenges and a lot of heartache opening those 4 walls, and you've done a great job, Angela. And I would suggest anybody to check out your venue if they're in the Seattle area. But how can people find you? How can people find out more about the club?
laughscomedyclub.com. Number one on Google search. So if you Google search Seattle comedy or comedian near me and you're in Seattle, we'll be first on Google. We have 4-star review for over 900 reviews. So you can always find us on Google on the internets. You can find us in person at 5220 Roosevelt, way northeast, right next to the University of Washington. And we're online. Check us out.
And I would absolutely suggest anybody going, and it is a great place to go to a date night. And you just got to hope that it's not bluegrass music up there. But it's like, I've had so many great nights at a comedy club, and you guys, you deliver it. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud to know you. And I respect that you never gave up. You didn't, whether that was through COVID or with transients, being scary outside of your business and making people afraid to come in, or whether that's a mural that you drew on and the guy next to you said, that's my property. It's like, you have all of these challenges that you wouldn't expect, but you've gone through them all, and you've delivered an amazing business that is absolutely taking off. And I would suggest anybody to go check out your venue. And so thank you. Thank you for opening up and talking some business with me and inspiring other people to take a chance and start. And if that's the comedy route or not, it doesn't matter, but just start.
What I like the best is that I haven't had to lift one weight this entire time.
I guess we didn't really mention I was your personal trainer for a long time, Angela. So I love that. Well, thank you.
And with the frog jump.
That's right. Let's plug me as a trainer now. I love you, and I hope that you and Dave have an awesome weekend, and I will send people your way because your service is exceptional. You go above and beyond, you go the extra mile, and you definitely give that 3 to 5% more to the audience members. And I know for comics that we mutually know that they feel very welcomed with you and they feel a part of your community. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Blue.
All right, Angela, thanks. Thank you so much for listening to Navigating No. If this episode brings you value, or you know someone who could benefit from it, the best way to support the show is by sharing and subscribing. It's completely free and helps us reach more people. And if you have any questions, feedback, or guests you'd like me to interview, drop a comment while you're there. I'd love to hear from you. And most importantly, thank you for tuning in. And let's continue sharing optimism and positivity.